Thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Glover. Beginning tonight at York University, where one of its athletes who hopes to one day represent Canada at the Olympics is now at risk of being deported in the coming weeks, along with his family. Today, a rally was held at the university to help raise awareness, and our Greg Ross was there.
What do we want? A home in Canada!
Members of Toronto's Jamaican community say Tamari Lindo and his family deserve to stay.
My family's been working, they've been paying their taxes, they've never gotten themselves involved in any crimes.
Lindo moved here with his family back in 2019 when he was only 15 years old. He says they left in fear after threats were made against his father, who was a supporter of Jamaica's opposition party.
It's always been a genuine fear in my family ever since I was a kid.
The Lindos came to Canada in the hopes of finding safety.
Aidan Simmerdone is an immigration lawyer who is now representing the family. He says Tamari's father has been attacked for his political views in Jamaica multiple times.
He, in 2012, had his neck slashed when he was organizing people during the Jamaican election. In 2016, there was a botched assassination attempt, and these have preceded calls and threats and threatening messages. And in 2019, he was chased by gunmen.
He says that's when they fled to Canada and applied for refugee status, but they were denied. They later filed a humanitarian and compassion application, but that too was denied. Simmerdone is now appealing that.
In my opinion, the decision is unreasonable and did not take into consideration the hardships of their removal if it were to occur.
But he fears he may not have enough time. The Lindos were only given a 1-month extension before they have to leave.
Support the Lindos, boss!
Let's support the Lindos!
Right now, what we need is the public pressure to keep going.
They're planning to organize more rallies like this one, and they're also planning to take the issue to their local members of parliament.
It really touches my heart to see that people really want to see my family's story and really see us succeed in life, and they really came out here to support, so it makes me very emotional.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Turning now to Brampton and a new push to crack down on auto theft. A number of top federal government officials were in town today to unveil a new national action plan to combat the problem. And the strategy will target organized crime groups and include tougher penalties for auto theft. Dale Manukduk has all the details.
The federal government announced a series of measures to combat the growing auto theft crisis in the country.
We have seen an overwhelming and frankly unacceptable increase in auto theft across the country, and especially right here in Ontario.
According to insurance fraud organization Equité Association, a car was stolen every 5 minutes in Canada. In Ontario, there's been a 43% increase in stolen cars since 2021. And auto theft insurance claims in the province zoomed past the $1 billion threshold last year. As part of the plan, the government is amending the criminal code, cracking down on the sale of devices used to steal cars, and increasing Canada Border Service Agency's capacity to inspect shipping containers by purchasing new scanners that can be used at local rail yards or large ports.
It's a lot more efficient and less expensive to retrieve those vehicles here than at a crowded port in another province in Montreal. To be able to do that, we need the most efficient and effective technology scanners. Some are mobile, some are more fixed.
Most stolen vehicles end up overseas. This year, CBSA has intercepted over 1,200 stolen vehicles. As far as new criminal offenses, those will target auto thefts linked to organized crime and the possession and distribution of technology used to steal cars. The new legislation will also propose new offenses for adults recruiting minors into the criminal world of auto theft.
I'm a father of 2 young boys, and we know that there's been a lot of talk about youngsters being involved in this criminality. But what I think is really critical is thinking about who is directing those youngsters, who's directing that teenager, who's orchestrating and providing the resources for that teenager. The key issue here is targeting the root causes of the criminal behavior.
The action plan comes a week after Ontario announced stiff driver's license suspensions or even lifetime bans for repeat auto theft offenders.
I'd like to see a vehicle harder to steal right from the beginning.
Ottawa says it could also look at regulatory measures for auto manufacturers.
Our current standard dates back to 2007, hasn't been updated since. So making the vehicle harder to steal, that isn't the silver bullet, but that is part of the solution for sure. All areas need to be part of it.
Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Brampton.
In Mississauga, a woman in her 50s is dead after a stabbing just before 9:30 this morning at a hotel.
We received a call for a stabbing at a hotel in the area of Britannia Road East and Whittle Road in the city of Mississauga. EMS and police attended a hotel room at that location to find a woman who had been stabbed. Unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries and was pronounced deceased by EMS.
Peel police say the victim and the suspect are known to each other, but are not treating the incident as a case of intimate partner violence. The Homicide Bureau is taking over the investigation, and of course, anybody with information is asked to contact police. We're learning more details tonight about a fatal boat crash north of Kingston. 3 people are dead and 5 others were taken to hospital following the crash on Bob's Lake Saturday night. Kimberly Molina was at the scene and spoke to a cottager who was one of the first on the scene.
An open-bow fishing boat and a speedboat are towed from the bay, the remnants of the tragic long weekend. Tony Hammond has lived on the lake for decades. He had seen a group of young people in a fishing boat across the bay earlier that evening, playing music, laughing. He heard them again around 9:30 Saturday night when he stepped out onto his deck. He also heard the distinctive roar of the speedboat's engine. From that moment, he says time slowed.
My brother from the kitchen heard the crunch, and before I could even get to our screen door, he was at the screen door, and I said, 911. Mass casualty, boat collision, multiple bodies in water.
Hammond says he and his brother rushed to their dock and into their boat to offer help.
My brother jumped in, we pulled her out, we began performing CPR.
They took the woman to shore and went out again to search for one person they heard was still missing. What stays with him is seeing a pink flip-flop sitting on the water while they searched.
And obviously poignantly, a flip-flop, pink flip-flop, just bobbing along.
The tragedy comes as Ontario Provincial Police launched their boat safety awareness campaign for the long weekend, a message echoed by the Canadian Safe Boating Council.
Especially at this time of year with the difference in air and water temperatures, oftentimes there's a fog. So that combined with boating at night, that can be a real challenge. And people really have to adjust how they operate their boat. You just have to respect the water and make sure that you understand that there are other people out there. So you need to pay particular attention to what you're doing.
Ontario Provincial Police are still investigating, but say the next step is for their collision reconstructionist to examine both boats. But people here are simply coming to grips with this tragedy and say they hope nothing like this ever happens again. Kimberly Molina, CBC News, Bob's Lake, Ontario.
Overseas, an investigation is underway into the helicopter crash on Sunday that killed the Iranian president, Ibrahim Raisi, along with Iran's foreign minister and 6 other officials died after the chopper crashed in bad weather. As Katie Simpson reports, it comes at a moment of high tensions, of course, across the Middle East, and at a time of crisis for Tehran, both at home and abroad.
Emergency crews had to cross difficult terrain to remove bodies from the crash site. It took about a day to find the wreckage amid foggy conditions in the mountains of northwestern Iran. State television said President Ibrahim Raisi's helicopter met with bad weather before it crashed, killing everyone on board. Some Iranians took to the streets to offer prayers and mourn, despite how unpopular Raisi was.
There is probably a greater gap today between Iranians as a people and their leadership than at any time since the revolution, because Raisi has been so ineffective in dealing with the great kind of existential economic issues that affect the country.
During his presidency, Raisi faced intense anti-government protests, largely led by women demanding rights after the death of Mahsa Amini.
Some of the worst human rights abuses occurred during his tenure as president, especially the human rights abuses against the women and girls of Iran.
And tensions have spiked with Israel and the West as Iran backs Hamas in the war in the Middle East. Raisi's death triggered an emergency cabinet meeting and calls for calm until elections are held in June. In the short term, not much is expected to change, both at home and with Iran's foreign policy, since Raisi was seen as a weak leader.
Raisi was very much a figurehead when it came to Iranian foreign policy. He was implementing the preferred policies of the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei.
The U.S. says its Iran policy does not change because of Raisi's death, and it will continue to monitor developments. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Okay, and Iranian Canadians in the GTA are, of course, watching developments there very closely. Many of the people that we spoke to today don't feel the deaths will change very much.
Nothing's going to change. As long as that regime is in power there, nothing's going to change.
There's somebody else going to take his place. It's going to be the same.
I think someone worse than him is going to come, and they're going to continue the same things that they did, but at least one of them is gone.
Many were not comfortable going on camera to comment on Raisi's death, but the majority of those who did speak to us expressed happiness at the news, with some calling Raisi a criminal and blaming him for many deaths during his time in the regime. Taking you now to Haiti and a rare look inside the country that's been dealing with a spiraling crisis. The uncontrolled gang violence in the island nation is leading to a worsening humanitarian problem for millions. Many are hoping an outside multinational force can help restore some order. Paul Hunter has more from Port-au-Prince.
For so many Haitians, humanitarian aid is all they have. This is a kitchen for the World Food Program. Here, hot meals are prepared for delivery to the countless in need. Thousands of such meals are made every day.
The places where we provide this assistance happen to be in the dangerous parts of Port-au-Prince, and that's a challenge in itself. So we've got very high vulnerability.
On this day, delivered to an encampment for Haitians forced from their homes by the gangs who control this area. Some have been here for weeks, others for months. Now, living in squalor and misery, they are desperately hungry.
It is heartbreaking. Right now, the crisis in Haiti, the humanitarian crisis in Haiti, is the worst since the 2010 earthquake. It's that bad, and things need to change.
This is Jacqueline Laurentier. I lost my home to the gangs, she says. I have 5 children with me. I don't even have a tent. I sleep in the open air with my kids. I'm grateful for the food, we're told by another woman. The hunger, she says, is killing us. Across town at the Canadian Embassy, on one of the city's busiest roads, fully armed Canadian forces keep careful watch from the rooftop as Haiti awaits the arrival of an international force led by Kenya to help restore order. We met with Canada's ambassador to Haiti, André-François Giroux.
Canada's been very involved with the planning of the multinational force. It's coming here with a very specific mandate, which is to help the police to get control back.
All of that is in the days and weeks to come. But at night, from our hotel balcony, gunshots. Reminders that the work ahead is daunting. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Port-au-Prince.
Welcome back. The Toronto Maple Leafs will introduce their new head coach this week, and they're bringing in someone with some experience, including a Stanley Cup win with St. Louis in 2019. It's former player and longtime coach Craig Berube. Our Lane Harrison explains what he brings to the bench and why he's a trailblazer in the sport.
In 2019, Craig Berube did something Leafs fans can only dream of. He won a Stanley Cup, bringing it home to the hamlet of Calahoo, Alberta, where he grew up identifying as Cree, with Indigenous ancestry on his father's side. Stefan Friday with Hockey Indigenous says he's the first Indigenous head coach the Leafs will have ever had.
Like, we have a large amount of players, yes, but when it comes to like coaches, I think it sparks a lot of interest. A lot of kids are very excited. They know there's a path, whether that's a coach, whether that's a player, or even a referee.
Friday says Berube could bring some luck to the team.
This is something I like to bring up a lot when it comes to Toronto Indigenous representation. The last Stanley Cup was in 1967, and the captain was Indigenous, George Armstrong.
A Stanley Cup ring is one major difference between Berube and the Leafs' previous coach, Sheldon Keefe, but he also brings a more intense coaching style to the locker room.
He holds players accountable. He's honest. He doesn't necessarily sugarcoat his messages, but at the same time, he'll tell you what you need to hear to improve.
This locker room footage from his time in St. Louis shows he knows how to fire up a squad.
Let's go, boys. Pump it up here. We're here for a reason, because we're a good hockey team, and we're going to come home with a cup here tonight.
According to one analyst, he could also help the Leafs up their physicality on the ice, something he knows a little bit about from his time as a player, which included a stint on the Leafs in the early 90s.
McCray and Berube, you are on.
He was a player that went undrafted, made his way on teams' roster, and played over 1,000 games in the NHL. You talk about tenacity, you talk about grit, you talk about physicality. This is what he exemplifies.
Berube will be officially introduced as the Leafs head coach at a press conference on Tuesday. Lane Harrison, CBC News, Toronto.
The increasing sophistication of artificial intelligence has led to growing concerns about its impact on young people. Major social media companies say they're dedicated to making sure AI content is labeled, but experts say parents and schools also need to teach kids how to consume and create content responsibly. Ithel Musa has that story.
David Bashai considers himself to be pretty social media savvy, but the 17-year-old admits artificial intelligence is making it hard to distinguish fact from fiction.
I have seen examples online where it is so difficult to tell whether that's the real person talking to you or whether that's an AI deepfake, and it's scary, right?
Social media companies like Snapchat, TikTok, and Meta, which owns Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, have all recently committed to labeling AI-generated content. TikTok has also created a guide with the nonprofit Media Smarts to help parents and their kids navigate the platform safely.
Ongoing conversations about media use make a huge difference in how kids behave and in how they deal with challenges and problems.
This expert says younger kids are especially vulnerable, so having the tools to assess what they're seeing is critical.
So they don't have a lot of background in critical thought. The combination of parents, teachers, there are a lot of locations where you can start to say, how do we become critical consumers of media?
While Sarah Kasai considers herself to be one, the 15-year-old still worries AI perpetuates unrealistic beauty standards on platforms where real models are already nearly perfect.
At least they still have imperfections. They're still people. As a young girl, it's kind of hard to not compare yourself to these standards that don't even exist.
Latchman says another challenge is that young people are also using AI to create content, sometimes without a full understanding of how harmful it can be.
We've seen in kids as young as in middle school, people have put the faces of young women in their classes on nude bodies and circulated them around on private messaging. And that is horrific.
Latchman says social media can have a negative impact on mental health, and AI has the capacity to supercharge the problem if we don't pay close enough attention. Ithel Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Ending the show on a bang tonight with a little bit of a behind the scenes as crews set up for tonight's massive fireworks display at Ashbridges Bay.
My approach for this one was very much creating atmosphere, building up, going down, giving it some speed, and really playing with the emotions of the audience. I want them to think that the show lasted 30 minutes. We're scheduled to do 14 minutes. Everything's going to go off between 14 and 15 minutes long, but I love when people come back to me after and say, that was a 30-minute show, that was amazing, that was on forever.
So in just a few hours, all of that hard work will be exploding into brilliant bursts of light and sound over Lake Ontario. And it's all thanks to an Indigenous-run company. They're called Dreamcatcher Fireworks, and they're from a First Nation just outside of Sudbury. About 14 members of the company have been busy setting up about 1,600 shells for the show, which is scheduled to get underway at 10 o'clock tonight. So let's get right to Colette and find out what is the weather going to be like as those fireworks are going off there at Ashbridges and across the across the region.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll tell you, I'm really glad about the timing, that we've still got some time for the active weather that we're seeing to kind of wind down, because right now it's very wound up, our atmosphere. So I do want to get to that. I think we'll be in much better shape, though, later on this evening. All right, our current temperatures, this is one factor in terms of the ingredients. Not just that we've had this heat. We were up to 28 degrees in Toronto, and in fact, winds are up to 30 degrees today. But the humidity in here as well, humidex values into the low 30s, seeing lots of that. So not just feeling spring-like, feeling very summer-like. And that provides some of the buoyancy for all of these storms you can see that fired up. They started in the state of Michigan, pushing across the waters of Lake Huron and the international border, and now well into southern Ontario, throwing the lightning strikes on there too. But it's not just lightning. We're talking about some strong gusty winds, especially where we have the severe cells. So some of these wind gusts, and I'm targeting really the areas in red. That means they're happening. The areas in yellow are severe thunderstorm watch, meaning it could happen, but it is imminent in these areas in red where we have the severe thunderstorm warning. So the winds gusting to 80, 90 kilometers an hour. Some of these are rather slow moving. So it means the rain is allowed to really intensify. So 70, 75 millimeters of rain, some flash flooding potential is there, and then even some hail. And that hail could be up to Toonie-size hail. So closer to the Toronto area, yes, under that warning now. We've seen this up towards Barrie. It's pushing now eventually towards Kawartha Lakes, back towards Chatham-Kent. You're now out of that, but we've seen it towards Acton, Halton Hills, all included with some of these stronger storms. Then with the humidity tomorrow even creeping higher into southwestern Ontario especially, that means we're talking about a special weather statement just for how sticky and oppressive it will feel. And as well, once we get these things winding down and some improvement, you could still be in a little bit of trouble around Georgian Bay this evening with firework activity. But into tomorrow and then Wednesday especially, that's when we get the pattern change. As that next front comes through, again, the chance that we could get into some severe weather. So some thunderstorms bubbling up late tomorrow into southwestern Ontario. Having a look at those overnight lows, they are mild. Toronto, it's going to be a warm day tomorrow, feeling like we're in the low 30s. And you'll be in the low 30s in southwestern Ontario, feeling like the upper 30s for our friends in Windsor, Chris.
Absolutely love that forecast. All right, thank you, Colette, and thank you for joining us. There's no show at 11 o'clock because of the NHL playoffs, but we'll see you back here tomorrow.